Live from our super secret studios above Jacques' Flower Shop, this is Girard at Large.
Yeah, baby!
Good morning, Manchester.
Live and local. News, sports, politics, traffic, and weather. Rich isn't afraid to tackle the tough questions.
Who told you you can eat my cookies?
You talking to me?
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
It's all here on the Girard at Large radio program.
Hello?
On 90.7 WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio.
I'm sorry, who'd you say you were?
I am your host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in.
That's right.
Here's Richard.
Good morning, Manchester, and to those of you in surrounding towns, welcome to Hour 1 of Girard at Large. I am your ever-full host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. You can find us on the web at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us because it makes it much easier for us to relay information about people like our next guest to you. Her name is Marilinda Garcia. She's a state representative from Salem, and she is a candidate for Congress in the 2nd District. She will face, at this point, former State Senator Gary Lambert, who's a retired Marine colonel, I believe, in a GOP primary for the honor of taking on Annie, where is Benghazi Custer, in the 2nd District. Good morning, Representative Garcia. All right, now I can tell you right now, you just need to inch a bit closer to that microphone.
Okay.
All right. So let's try that again. Good morning, Representative Garcia.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Now, why don't you take a moment, please, to introduce yourself to our audience, who you are personally and professionally, why you got into politics. You're a 4-term state rep out of Salem, and why are you running for Congress, for crying out loud? Not that we're disappointed to see you run, but why?
Well, somebody has to do it, so how about that? No, my name is Marilinda Garcia. As you pointed out, I'm a state rep from Salem. It was formerly, my district was Salem and Windham. Now it is just Salem. And
because it's a big boy town now, it has its own state reps.
And I'm in my 4th term, and I've been serving on the Finance Committee these last 2 terms. I've also served on legislative administration, election law, and I started off in children and family law. And, I first ran when I finished college at the age of 23. I started working part-time and frankly had always thought that involvement in the civic governance process was important. And so I would, volunteer on campaigns and, just be vaguely aware of what was going on in politics before I could vote, and then increasingly so when I came of age. And then when I finished college, I started working part-time and thought, why don't I look to work on a campaign for the upcoming midterm elections in 2006? And at that point, I started talking to a friend of mine who was involved in such things in New Hampshire, and he suggested to me for the first time, why don't you try running yourself? And honestly, the thought had never occurred to me prior to that. I had never imagined I would ever run for office or what that entailed specifically for me, and where I could potentially go from there. So anyway, I ran, and the rest is history, you could say. Subsequently, every 2 years when the reelection process would roll around, I'd, assess what I thought I could be doing that was meaningful. And I find that the state legislature, especially here in New Hampshire, where it's such an active citizen legislature, is a wonderful place to be impactful and do valuable things for the community. So I've enjoyed that. And now I wasn't looking to run for a 5th term only because I think one's effectiveness, maybe fades a little bit with time, or, maybe I needed to go off and try and do some other things for a while. It's a big world out there, and, there are a lot of opportunities. But given the assessment of what's happening right now in our country and what I find to be a lack of leadership in our current representation in CD2, I decided I've said when people have asked, would you ever consider running for higher office? I've said, well, maybe in the future, because I don't have a particular political ambition or trajectory. But then I found maybe the future's now. So I think it's about time my generation, step up and be a voice, because I'm a bit concerned, frankly, about what my future in this country is going to be, and I don't think that's a good place for us.
Now, you're a young lady. How old are you?
I'm 30.
And you're a college graduate? Now, you have several degrees, actually, don't you?
I do. I have a joint bachelor's degree, so 2 bachelor's degrees from Tufts and New England Conservatory, and then I have a master's from Harvard.
What are your bachelor's in? What are your degrees in?
They're English literature, communications, and harp performance, and my master's is in public policy.
Oh, a master's in public policy.
Mm-hmm.
From Harvard.
Yes.
I see. Well, it looks like they failed to impart in you their liberal ways there at Harvard.
Well, one of the things I found going to, Ivy League schools or Ivy League-esque schools in such an area as the People's Republic of Cambridge and Boston and all of that is, frankly, I find that if you want to take a stand, voice your views on issues, that it's more difficult coming from the conservative side because you're not in an echo chamber like everybody else is. So if you speak up, you really have to be able to defend and your position and understand why it is what you believe. So actually, I found it a useful exercise. I didn't understand so much that it was at the time, but I was constantly having to dig really deep and understand the underlying philosophies as to why I do believe in the philosophies of limited government, small government, personal responsibility, and free enterprise, and all of these things that, frankly, I think are under attack these days.
Now, and how old did you say you were?
When I first ran, I was 23.
So that makes you, 30 now?
I'm 30. Yeah, my birthday's
31.
coming up.
Well, you got a ways to go, Marilinda.
Okay.
Well, so let's ask about this. You said it's you felt it was time for people of your generation to start stepping up.
Mm-hmm.
That said, what do you offer outside of your education and your experience in the New Hampshire legislature by way of meaningful experience that the voters in the 2nd District of what is one of the most rural districts in the country, by the way? I mean, you wrap all the way around from Salem to... It's a huge district. What do you offer them by way of experience, either from the legislature, your work history, your education, your upbringing, that they would see you as a plausible candidate for Congress?
Well, here's the thing. I've had this question, and I think people sort of naturally gravitate, or they'll say, oh, well, this one, has military experience, or this one has, business experience. And all of those are, of course, wonderful things. And we have amazing leaders, that have been able to draw upon that breadth and depth of experience. But the fact is, I'm not running for an executive office. I'm running for a position where, honestly, at this point, I think you need to have ideas as to what in our state could potentially be developing our economy, keeping our market open, helping us with a long-term plan for financial solvency. These are things I've been working on in the state legislature. I've been very involved sponsoring legislation and working on it in the innovation economy with the high-tech industry, in healthcare reform. I've been doing a lot with pricing, transparency and open data, and just
and
tying.
We had you on the show when you tried to get the laws changed so that the Cancer Centers of America could come
right.
to the state.
That was regulatory reform. I've been working on a lot of that, and then frankly, at my time on the Finance Committee has just shown me that you can be in a budget crisis. So we had an $800 million budget hole to fill, and what did we do? We went through, we said, what are some efficiencies we can find? Let's make across-the-board cuts because we have to. Let's do that in as responsible and humane a way as possible. But let's get the job done. Let's not be afraid to do the right thing to fix our financial situation. And we did that, and now we're running a approximately $76 million surplus. That's because we weren't afraid to be leaders and, again, make those tough decisions. So now you translate that to Washington. I mean, just yesterday or 2 days ago, we have a budget deal. People are patting themselves on the back. And sadly, all it seems to have been is a way to avoid, a crisis. Oh, look at us. We didn't, shut down the government. Well, great, but at the same time, you didn't implement any meaningful reforms. Why not have something like a, federal government hiring freeze? We're going to have baby boomers retiring in droves in the next decade. Why not make sure we're not expanding government that way? Why not be looking for efficiencies? Why would we put in spending caps and then overshoot them by $45 billion? These are things that federal representation, I think, really has to get serious about, because, again, I have every reason to be concerned about the long-term success of not only New Hampshire, but the entire U.S. And if the whole ship goes down, our state goes with it. At the same time, having been in the state government, I understand that I and my colleagues, we can have all the best ideas in the world as to how we're going to, develop healthcare, develop our economy, develop all these wonderful things that keep our quality of life high and bring people here and, stop the brain drain situation we have going on. But half of my time in the legislature, we spend trying to, frankly, get out from underneath or forestall the horrible things the federal government is shoving down the pipeline at us. They're always wreaking havoc now on our, health insurance climate, our budget plans, all of these things, be it Medicaid expansion, the first failed stimulus implementation, all of these things. So I would like our people in Washington to at least, if they're not fixing the problems on the federal level, at least stay out of the way of our states and let our state and local officials who are closest to the citizens on the ground actually, get in there and really work on our issues.
Are there specific areas where, if you're elected to Congress, you will focus using your experience as a state legislator to pull the federal government out of state legislatures around the country?
I'll be perfectly honest and tell you that I don't know, exactly how the process works in terms of committee assignments and if they have any particular rules, about sponsoring legislation and all of these things that are very open here and, transparent in the state legislature. But certainly anything I can do or anything that comes across my desk or the floor in terms of I'll certainly look at it in the view of, will this allow my state to prosper? Will this allow the innovators and entrepreneurs and, people that want to be successful and, again, be involved in our economic health in our state? Is this going to help or hinder that development? And so that'll certainly be one thing I'll be looking at. And at the same time, to the extent I'm able, of course, I would love to, get in there and actually be promoting policies that will assist in that as well.
Marilinda Garcia, she's a Republican out of the town of Salem, and she's running for the 2nd Congressional District seat. She first has a primary, She first has a primary against former state senator Gary Lambert of Nashua, who is a retired Marine colonel, and who, by the way, shortly after announcing his candidacy, was invited to appear here on Girard at Large, but we never heard back. We get all his press releases, we just don't hear back.
Well, in all fairness, Girard, it was 6 a.m. You invited me. Maybe he has a longer drive than I do. Though with his military experience, I would think he'd be more prone to waking up early than me.
I'm sure we'll hear from former Senator Lambert as things wear on. And who knows? Sure. I mean, it's still early in the process. There could be more people who get into the race. So, Marilinda, there have been a lot of assumptions made by a lot of people on a lot of things. And we were having an interesting chat off the air a little bit about your background. I'm surprised to learn that you speak Italian. Mm-hmm. Even though I know you're half Italian. And what is it you said? Your Spanish is not for public consumption?
Well, the way I've always described it, because, I think in the U.S. we have the fortunate luxury, frankly, of being able to do a lot of introspection about these things because, food and other such basic necessities for the vast majority of us, because we have a high standard of living in our country compared to the rest of the world, we can think about things like, who am I, and what is my identity? And,
we no longer have to go to India to find ourselves.
Right. And, and who are we, in this amazing melting pot? So I think I did, a bit of that in college and, just understanding. So my father is, his family's from the Southwest, from New Mexico. My mom is from Italy. They both went to college in Boston, which is where I was born. And then we moved to New Hampshire shortly thereafter when I was young. But anyway, so I came to describe it this way. I am half Hispanic, half Italian, and all American. And that is the way I think it is for all of us, because we are combined identity. I love culture just as much as anyone else. I think it gives us richness. It gives us, such vibrancy and interesting differences. But at the same time, it's our Americanness and our concern about, what is happening with our country and what we're doing about it that binds us together. So.
You were sharing, and you shared that information about your background as you were talking about some of the places you've been, some of the businesses you worked at, some of the things that you were done. And you said you worked for a university in Italy, and that's when I asked you about your languages. So share with the audience what you were telling me during the break.
Sure. So as I ran for the legislature, right when I got out of college pretty much, I started working part-time. So I've been a teacher at Phillips Exeter for a number of years now. I still do that. And one of the challenges with our legislature is that 6 months of the year, you frankly are a professional volunteer. We're paid $100 a year, which doesn't go very far. That's before taxes. And
glad you're paying taxes on $100.
And so, unless you have a spouse supporting you or you have your own business that you can, delegate responsibilities to your employees or, have some other sort of professional situation where you're able to, again, step out for quite a number of hours a week, it's a bit difficult to develop a career, in one specific thing. And that's why I think a lot of people who are my age aren't able to be in the legislature. There just really isn't, the opportunity for time. Anyway, so basically what I would do is working part-time, while in the legislature. And then in the 6 months off, if you will, when you're not in session, I've done a variety of things as different as I, was working in curriculum development and marketing for a university in northern Italy, as you mentioned. I also spent time in Haiti and the Dominican Republic helping to establish a youth orchestra foundation to build some cross-cultural understanding and cooperation between those two nations that share an island. And then I also have spent time working for a cybersecurity firm because in the last few years, that's become a very important policy issue. And, one, it's a fascinating field. It's recently outpaced drug trafficking as the most high-dollar industry, and the risk is huge on that. When it comes to privacy, personal information, and then financial hazard, it's quite a serious thing.
Well,
so
I'm glad you brought that up, because we actually have a segment each week on this show called Privacy in the Constitution. Dr. Jeff Zarnick, a retired Manchester police officer and former chairman of the Criminal Justice Department at Hester College, anchors that every Monday at 8:20. And one of the things, and maybe we can just kind of dive into this, I don't know if it's a side issue or not, but one of the things that seems to be happening as technology progresses is that the Fourth Amendment is becoming irrelevant. And the federal government often argues something called the proximity argument, saying that, because we're not going through your desk or your briefcase or digging through your trash and we're kind of snatching it out of the air electronically, we don't need the Fourth Amendment warrant requirement to be met. What say you, Marilinda?
I think it's very difficult because what we've seen is there's a very incremental sort of collective absorption into technology. And in some ways, some try to push back from that because they say, well, I don't want to be on social media. I don't, want to be able to be tracked. And that's completely understandable. At the same time, to stay competitive in our economy and, be able to disseminate your information, reach out to the markets, depending on what industry is in. You kind of have to embrace all of this. And with that, it's that, old balance of what is more important to you. Do you want your business to develop, or do you want to maintain, a completely anonymous cyber presence, or none at all? And I think it's difficult. And sure, I believe the lines are blurry on that when it comes to government policy, because same as we've seen with, airline security and all of these types of things, how important is our safety, and how far can we go, and what do we compromise to achieve that, but at the same time maintain our personal privacy and all of these things. So I think it's particularly difficult in the technological arena, the cyber arena. But I would hope that people would err on the side of allowing, people, individuals and personal privacy, to remain not transgressed upon, basically. I think it's challenging.
Well, and you've got the NSA, people's emails, phone calls being monitored, databased, allegedly anonymously.
Right.
You've got CISPA. I think that's the acronym of this, the whole Internet Security Protection Act, whatever they call it. And liberty activists around the nation are outraged, and it seems that the government has adopted a guilty until proven innocent.
There's that, and to me, the most insidious part of it is that you could think of it as, okay, well, they're doing all this big data heuristics and, all of these things that undercover basically are collecting and, storing, and all of your personal information, what you look at online and all of this. But at least that's something you're opting into. Again, you're the one signing up for Facebook. You're the one on the internet. You're doing all of that. My bigger problem is when the government says, we're going to reform health care. Now we're going to mandate this, and we're going to basically mandate that you join this program and enter all your personal information, and we'll store it. That's the type of thing where you don't even have the option to not be involved in that. And you're seeing that in education as well, and pretty much, across the board. And it's starting to get to the point where they're doing, retina scans, fingerprints. So it's not even just, kind of what you're looking at online anymore.
As you may know, we kind of led the charge here against Common Core, and part of it was on the whole data effort. Do you see the federal government providing states incentives to adopt things that it can't by law make them do or impose on them as a way around it? And if so, what do you do as a congressman in that case?
Well, I've actually seen that, and that's been one of my biggest frustrations in the state legislature, and that every time we're going through the budget process and we're trying to look at, okay, has this program been successful? What are our outcomes? That's really important. Has this had a positive outcome? Has this, resulted in a saving of money or, better social outcome or whatever it is that's in place? And instead of being able to make our determination on that and say, let's eliminate this program or continue it. Instead, what you hear a lot is, well, the feds are giving us money for that, or they promised this much more, or here's a new one. And so let's take this grant, because if we don't, we'll lose the federal monies. That is a really wrong way, I think, to be making these decisions. So that's a concern. And when it comes to things like Common Core, again, and same with the ACA. I mean, I heard a panel with some NEA members and AFT, not ATF. That's confusing.
You got to think about that one. American Federation of
exactly.
Teachers.
And they were saying that, frankly, even they, have issues with, and they're hearing, screaming from teachers and local school boards and all of this. They're like, what is this, Common Core? We don't know what we're doing. What is it accomplishing? And they don't want it right now. They want to slow it down. But when it comes from the federal government and there's money tied to it, it's just this rush, to get it in. And I think it causes for poor implementation, and then, frankly, cements into place something that maybe isn't even a good idea to begin with. And that was the thing with, No Child Left Behind, though at least with No Child Left Behind, that was the first attempt to actually collect, metrics and data and all these things. So, because you can't fix what you can't measure in some respects.
Well, yes, and then one could argue that the federal government trying to fix something that it shouldn't be measuring in the first place is out of bounds.
Right.
I don't know if you want to go there, but I can't think of a problem the federal government's created that is going to be improved by more of the federal government doing what it does.
Right. And I also can't really think of too many problems they've solved recently either. So,
well, Marilinda, we are sadly out of time already, but if you would like to share contact information, so if people want to learn more about your candidacy and your campaign and the issues you're going to look at.
Sure. Well, so I jumped in 2 weeks ago, so I'm planning on intending on having a formal rollout and press conference in January after all the holiday hubbub. But my website right now is marilindagarcia.com. So I was named after my great aunt and my grandmother, Maria and Linda. So Marilinda, all one word, without the A in the middle, and then Garcia. And you can read more about me there. I have an online donation portal, so that's important. Anybody who's feeling generous this time of year, I appreciate it. And then I'll have a full website developed in the coming month. And a lot of other things, of course, too, as the campaign ramps up. And I look forward to visiting. I don't know what the base of your show is and what area exactly, but if it reaches up north and all these different areas, I look forward to meeting and visiting everybody who can hear me right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, Representative Heichel in Goffstown says hello. He welcomes you to Goffstown. And in your district, we have the towns of Litchfield.
Okay.
We also have, let me see, Bow, Milford, Mount Vernon, New Boston, and Amherst.
Okay. All right.
Allentown in your district?
I think so.
Just outside of Concord?
I have to check that one. Yeah.
Well, and we actually push pretty far out to the west, but being the adorable little radio show that I am, I can only cover Manchester and 17 surrounding towns.
Okay. Well, you know what? Grow.
Okay. We will do the same. We wish you all the best. Marilinda, Marilinda Garcia for Congress.com is where you can learn more. We appreciate your getting up early to be with us this morning, Representative Garcia.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you.
And
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Seeing how the campaign unfolds. So, you can't always judge a book by its cover. But here's the problem, generally speaking, with politics, is that someone, whether they're for her or against her, want to label her as an Hispanic politician, a Latina, whatever you want to call it. I just heard a fairly accomplished young lady who seems to be reasonably thoughtful and have a governing philosophy when it comes to her positions and beliefs. And that is why I did the kind of interview that I did this morning, because I don't want to feed the group them, label them, and pigeonhole them narrative by discussing the grouping, the labeling, and the pigeonholing that's taken place. Does that make sense?
It does.
But I'm just weird like that. I don't really care what you look like. I don't really care what your last name is. I don't really care whether or not I can pronounce it correctly. I care, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, about the content of your character and not the color of your skin.